Happy Monday. Welcome back. We are in the office again with my beautifully decorative miscellaneous stuff. Not the pretty paintings. So, I had on my mind today cancellation fees, cancellation policies. This is something that's come up a decent amount for me over the last couple days, as well as just a part of the job. Anyone who's in, I don't know if I would say service-based, but appointment-based industry, we'll say that, is going to deal with cancellations. And there are many different approaches to handling that. And I think for a lot of people, it's really hard to find an approach that feels right, or find an approach where everyone wins. And one of the things that I have learned with policy setting in general is it's not about finding one that everyone wins. I do believe that most situations have a solution that benefits everyone. Most situations do. The issue is when people's own stuff gets in the way of making this beneficial. So, cancellation policy, for instance, if you have to enforce it, that can make someone upset. Understandably. Now, they might be upset because they thought your policy was something and it wasn't, or they forgot, or they feel like the excuse that they gave warrants waiving the fee, and they might argue that instead of just accepting the fee. And then on the enforcer side, so to speak, whoever has to decide if something's getting billed or not, they have to make sure their emotions don't get in the way. So they have a policy for a reason. It's not supposed to be emotionally driven. If somebody cancels in a nice way or a mean way, that really shouldn't be changing whether we charge them or not, so to speak. People are human, obviously, and that can affect how things are handled, or maybe there's room for negotiation depending on your field, and if someone comes up in a hostile way, that makes it hard to negotiate. And I don't inherently think there's anything wrong with that, because most services that have cancellations or appointment based are relational in some sense. Like you're scheduling an appointment with another person usually, so relationships play a factor in that, and I think that's fine to a certain extent. There's a question of being biased or not in an unhealthy way, and I think some biases are okay and helpful. It just depends on what they are, and that's a great topic for a different video. But pretty much every field acts in some sort of bias. People usually just have an issue with what the bias is or isn't, and that's kind of the issue. But from a legal ethical perspective in therapy world, there's a lot of effort to prevent bias. So the cancellation policy piece is a hard one for me constantly. Doing this for, I guess I've been setting my own policies for 4 years now, over 4 years now, and working within policies for closer to 6 years. And it's hard to find one that makes a lot of sense for everyone involved, because you have to take into account, as a therapist, your fallibility and your ability to mess things up and to not be accurate. You have to take into account your clients and know that they're not all going to respect the policy. Some might overly respect it. Take into account how we're communicating it. So if I have a policy but I never bring it up to someone, but they signed and consented to it in the paperwork, as black and white information goes, they've agreed to it. But did we actually make sure that they knew it and understood it? That's another piece. And there's a question of how often do we need to remind them, if ever. And there's a line between that's a kind and polite thing to do versus that's overkill to do that. So there's lots of different approaches. I do think one of the more important things is to be super clear up front what policies are that could inconvenience your clientele. So cancellation policies are one of them. So for me, that's cancellation policies. Really everything around pricing and scheduling is that category for most people. So the 4 areas that I have in my pricing are cancellations and no-shows. So they function the same way, except one I get a heads up in some capacity, and the other I get nothing. And so I'm clear on those. I guess I have 3 main ones for the pricing. The third one is, I won't go into the 4th one because it's about pricing structure of insurances involved. So but the third primary one is that sessions are paid for before the follow-up session begins. So if someone needs to wait on a payment going through, fine. If they're not able to pay or their card declines or something after the appointment, fine. I'll reach out, but the next one that is scheduled will not go through. We're not going to hold that appointment until it's paid for. And one of the ways I run that is if it's on the calendar still and we're coming up to the day and you haven't paid, and now we get into the new cancellation window, you will risk owing double for that. Now, I'll take people off the calendar if they ask me to, but if they say, yeah, I can pay it, I'll get it to you, and then they haven't, and then the day before, like, hey, I still don't have it, can we cancel? They can, but now they owe me for the session that happened and the cancellation session. When it stacks to 2 like that, I just take them off the calendar permanently, even if they say keep me on, because I don't want them accruing more financial issues there, and that's not very common at all. This is something I always am trying to look into and hearing more. I know these videos aren't like crazy popular, but I'm always open to people's input in the comments for this stuff, and especially something like cancellation policies. I love hearing different ones and new ones. Mine's a 72-hour notice for that, and it is a full fee charge if it's canceled within that time frame. It's very different than a lot of people's, but it is also something that I communicate clearly. Medical emergencies I exempt. I have exemptions for pregnancies, whether that is the client or household family member where we know this is coming. You don't have to worry about canceling with me if you're going into labor. I'll just assume that's what that is, and it'll be waived. And those are I think the only 2 exceptions I have. And medical emergency for me is hospitalization. So, and some people disagree with that. Some people, they'll charge half the fee. A lot of people do 24 hours. Some do 48 hours. Some will charge half the fee if it's in the 48-hour window, full fee if it's in the 24-hour. Some people give a free one as a warning saying, hey, I take this seriously, I'll let this slide, next one I won't. Some people don't do that. Some people just don't have a cancellation policy. Some people, I've heard this one, that they'll do technically a no cancellation policy, but people pay for like a certain amount of appointments. Like you're paying that you'll do 10 over the course of 10 weeks. And so if you cancel, that's just, you've done a prepaid package already. And that's an interesting one, where you just have to move it within that time frame. Like you're allowed 10 over a 10-week period. If you choose not to use them, whatever, but you're still just billed weekly for that. And so sometimes people can be spending and losing the same amount of money, depending on the perspective. And like the therapist can be earning the same amount, but the way it's presented changes. And this is a part that's fascinating to me, and one I want to look more into is we will often change our opinions and decision making based on the context, not in terms of we understand it differently. That matters too. When sometimes when we explain why cancellation policies exist, people will change their opinion on them on the receiving end. And that's true the other way. Sometimes when clients explain to us the impact of the cancellation policy, we can have empathy and understand maybe we're too strict, maybe we're too soft. But on the perception piece, how we handle cancellations. So that person who says, you know, you're committing to 10 sessions, you're going to be billed every Monday for the appointment for the week. You can cancel any of them, you can move any of them around, but this is what you've agreed to. And that can feel different. And it's similar with like subscriptions. So some people, and there are some types of therapy that do that are more concierge style, where you pay a monthly fee, and if you need the service, you use it. And some of these can even charge more, and people will use it less. And it's just the way that they're being directly impacted. It's very interesting, psychologically speaking, and I love looking into them, and I'm always open to changing my policies and my approach. Some of that depends on where you're at in your career and where you're at with life. So me, I'm the only person that runs my practice. It is a much, much, much bigger deal for me to have a cancellation than someone who owns a larger group practice. My impact is way more direct than when it isn't. And you think about cancellation policies for really big events, for instance, where maybe they're making $1 million on the night and your $50 piece isn't a huge part of that. But for me, if I'm seeing 6 clients in a day and one person cancels, that's what, a 17% reduction in income that I'll have that day for a time slot that I potentially could have filled. And there's back and forth on that, where a therapist that's really struggling, they don't have anyone to fill it, and so that argument doesn't work. Well, they could fill it, and that's the ironic part, you don't have a lot of clients, so you're not gonna fill it, but they also need the money, versus someone who's really full and has a wait list. Like, yeah, people will take that, and the ironic part is usually they don't need the money as much. So that's a factor too, of your therapist usually is trying to make a living, not trying to mooch off of you and take every dime. There's going to be those people, but most of the time it's a question of livelihood, not a question of wanting to screw you over. And most therapists I know are really empathetic to that, and they understand it sucks to be charged a cancellation fee. And most therapists I know also either go to or have gone to therapy, and they understand that too. And I've worked with a lot of people in adjacent industries that do appointment-based work, and they are typically more understanding of cancellation policies because they know that their business requires that as well. So some of this is worldview and perspective. That's not the only thing. So I'm not sitting here thinking I'm on a high horse and that I have my policy set up perfectly and that I understand everyone's needs and situation. I actually hate navigating cancellation fees. I hate it when people cancel, because then I have to say there's going to be a fee. Again, this is within that policy window, and some people are super understanding, and some people up front will say, I know there's going to be a cancellation fee, no worry, I'll see you next time. That's the easiest for me, but I would say probably at least 50 to 70% of the time, at least, there's pushback against it, trying to get out of the fee, trying to argue around it, which is hard as well. Either I didn't know that was the policy, I forgot that was the policy, I didn't think this counted for it. And the way that I've gotten more comfortable handling that is it's really explicit when I start therapy, and everyone gets a second. They have their paperwork, and then I physically hand them. If I see them virtually, I email them. They get a tangible copy of my policies, and then I have a link to those policies in my email signature for every email that goes out. So, I feel better about that now, but again, it's a relational business. So even if that all makes sense on paper, there's a question of when do you have grace for someone, when do you have understanding for their life circumstances. Because people, it's almost always an issue of affordability and finances, and that can feel gross when you're like, I get not having money. I've had that experience, and money being tight, and I am someone who hates spending unnecessary money, but I also get it. And I'm also someone who really values following through on their word, which I mess up all the time. But if I say I'm going to be somewhere and then I'm not, even if it's excusable by my perspective, I might still say, is there anything you can do can we work around this in any way? And if they say no, sorry, then it's okay, sure. I'm out the money. I did commit to that, and that's on me. So, and for me, I think there's a difference between trying to work something out versus accountability. And that's something that I struggle with the most on the receiving end, is when people don't take accountability for violating the policy. It's one thing to take accountability and then just try to work something out. Hey, sorry, totally didn't remember that was the policy, my bad. I'm just curious if there's anything we can do to work around it. That's taking accountability and responsibility for misunderstanding it, versus saying words like "I didn't know," or "That's not fair," or I've been told before I'm only interested in what was I told? I'm only interested in said person to make money off them. It's not true. Which has been a cool experience for me learning it's not true, because there's been plenty of people I've turned down who will pay my full fee and be consistent, and they're not a good fit for me, or they're going to be really hard to work with, or they're not respectful of the work I do. They're willing to throw money at me. I don't want that. I want a good relationship. Do I want to have income as well? Yes, I do. But that I can't take income at the expense of hating my job. So, and one part of my job that's never fun is dealing with the cancellation piece. And to bring that back to relationship, that often comes in the form of figuring out how do you navigate a conversation with someone who's upset at a cancellation fee, because you don't want to lose them as a client and have them say, well, this is awful, I'm not coming back, I'm too hurt by this. And that makes it hard when you do a lot of your communication through email. I think that actually is smoother on the phone when you can connect with a person. It's kind of like when you're having an argument with someone via text. It's like it's difficult. So how do you stay relationally clean while also standing your ground about a boundary? And clients should do that as well. Stand your ground to your therapist about a boundary that's important to you, but also try to be understanding of the other side and respectful and value the relationship first over anything. So, and then different factors make a difference. I've had all these experiences of struggling with cancellation fee with clients who I've worked with for a longer period of time. They're usually the most relaxed about it. They get it. So they're easier to work with often, not all the time, but that's one case. The parents of clients, so a lot of times I'm working with kids, and the parent is who's going to cancel, and they will have their opinion of cancellation fees, not the kid. Hopefully, if the kid has an opinion, then that's an issue with the parenting. That should not be being discussed with the kids, the finances of the situation. But that can be harder if I'm not doing work directly with the parents actively. Then our relationship isn't as strong as it is with my client, the kid. So sometimes there's not as much equity built there, relational equity. Maybe I've seen a kid 20 times and we're connected really well, but I've only talked with the parent a handful of times. And that can be especially true teenagers if they drive themselves to therapy, or if you're used to one parent bringing the kid each week, but a different parent is communicating with you about cancellations. That's hard when you have one relationship with that one and not the other. And then, those are the two primary categories. I guess new clients is another category that's hard too, when you have to enforce a cancellation fee and you don't know the person super well yet. So there is very little built in trust. So that's really hard in those first few weeks if that happens. And it is what it is. Sometimes you lose someone over it. And a lot of new therapists, and me to an extent for sure, seasoned therapists, will struggle with that element of, if I enforce it, I might lose the client. And if I don't enforce it, like they might say, well, let's say you charge $100 per session. Like if I enforce this now, I'll make the $100, but I'll lose the client forever. Or I can just eat the $100 loss, and maybe I see them 8 more times. So it's make 800 or make 100. That's a really appropriate argument, I think. The issue is, the bigger picture is not putting your foot down about boundaries. And is this going to be an issue? Is this an area that you slide? And what's the ethical consideration if you're sliding for this person who's being pushy about it versus someone else who is actually being really polite and understanding, and then you don't make an adjustment for them? And that can be hard. The person who's saying, oh, I totally understand you have to charge, no big deal. They're saying, I take accountability, I understand, I want to be cooperative with how we work together. And then you just go ahead and accept that fee, versus someone else who says, I disagree with you, you're wrong, I'm going to quit if you don't do this. And you say, okay. And you don't charge them. So to me, there's also this element of respect and like a healthy pride in your work of, I want to work with people who are understanding. And why would I want to keep a client who is going to accost me for something? It's not the same as getting frustrated by something. I can take responsibility for how I've messed up in something and still be frustrated that I'm losing the money, right? If I cancel with a provider and they bill me for that hour, I can still be frustrated that that's happening and be annoyed and maybe even try to negotiate, what can we do, anything at all, please. That is different than me telling them that they are bad, that that's a stupid practice, that they're being disrespectful. So you can still have emotions about something and still maintain healthy interaction, even if it's a bit of a heated one, or a passionate one, maybe is a better word to say. So those two things should not be confused. Being frustrated about an experience. If you call Amazon and you're upset about a product or a return not being allowed or a refund not being allowed, and you are mean to them, that's inappropriate. It doesn't matter how bad. Same with at a restaurant. If you're mean to the wait staff, assuming they've just gotten something wrong, not assuming they're being terrible to you, assuming an order is wrong or a refund is not going through, you are being mean. That is not the same as being upset about something going on that is wrong. I'm upset because this product was broken when I got it, and I don't understand why you're not willing to give me a refund or a partial. That doesn't make sense to me. This bothers me. What can we do to make this right? I use Amazon because I've had a lot of good experiences with them, but I've also had a nightmare of an experience with one product, which really dropped my perception of them a lot, despite having a ton of good experiences. And then it helped. It's been better since then with other people, but it was one person, and they actually genuinely frustrated me, and I thought were being mean to me. But for the most part, they do a really good job respecting the customer and trying to work something out and work out an arrangement. Again, billion-dollar company, they can afford to eat some losses sometimes for customer satisfaction, whereas a therapist who's maybe struggling to make ends meet, they simply don't have the ability to do that all the time. And a lot of them wish they could. And that's one thing I notice about a lot of therapists is a lot of them wish they would never have to charge for cancellation. So when you hear a therapist say they get really uncomfortable about dealing with cancellation policies, it's usually because they hate that it has to happen. It's inconvenient for them in the sense of they're trying to be caretakers, but they have to enforce a hard line. Which this is the beauty of having an administrative assistant, or if you're at a group practice, having a front desk person that handles all that. I currently don't have an administrative assistant or staff member, but if I were to hire one, the very first thing I would pay someone else to do is handle my scheduling and my billing. Those are the two things that can really bum out clients and get them upset. I'd rather someone else I pay for do the back and forth with billing so that I can better preserve my relationship with clients. It's uncomfortable, and when you're supposed to have a relationship, but then there's a transaction in there, like an explicit transaction, that's really hard. And it's one of the few things that reminds people that this is a professional job. It's not just a relational job, and that gets difficult. Those reminders are important because we're not supposed to be friends with our clients. We're supposed to have good relationships and healthy relationships with them, and even model difficult situations. And that's one of the benefits of a cancellation policy, is we can model healthy conflict resolution. And I have been able to do that multiple times. I've also not been given the opportunity. I always try to push that forward, but the other person has to receive it. And usually both parties need to be willing to listen and accept where they're at fault. So that's an encouragement for me that even if I have a policy that I've had for years, it doesn't mean it's right or the best one. I'm certain mine isn't the best one. I'd love to be able to espouse that I have found the best policy ever at some point. Doubtful I'll get there, but I hope people can understand, whether you're listening as a therapist or as not a therapist, or you're listening as someone who does appointment-based services with cancellation fees, as well as someone who receives those services and is at risk of ever canceling or not, that this is really complicated. And very few people that I've met are strictly just after your money. Most people I meet, whether therapists, personal trainers, hairstylists, whatever, they usually are just wanting to do their job well and care for their client base. Most people don't like enforcing cancellation policies. It's uncomfortable. Just plain and simple. There's always exceptions to that, but most people I know, they don't like doing that. It's uncomfortable. I hate it. but it's also a necessary part of my work if I want to provide for my family. So, and part of that is always looking for, how do I protect my family / me, it's a personal thing. How do I protect my business? How do I protect my clients? So anytime I can change a policy that benefits me / family, benefits me, my practice, and my client, anytime I can change a policy that benefits those three things, I love it. Anytime you can make your business, yourself, and your clients' lives better all with one decision, that is fantastic. Those are some of the coolest moments for me when it comes to either updating your policy or changing how your practice works. It's wonderful. So it's just hard to do that all the time. Usually a change benefits one of those things more than the others, and that's not wrong. The issue is you don't want to always disregard your clients, always disregard your business or it'll close down, always disregard your family and not pay your bills. You have to try to balance that triangle as well as you can. So yeah, just some thoughts on cancellation policies because it's been relevant to me. It's something I really care about. It makes my day harder to deal with it because I'm thoughtful with all my responses, and I try not to just give a flippant like, no, you owe me money. I want to keep the relationship preserved. And if you are someone who's ever tried to be intentional with relationships and make sure they work and not just be like, man, I'm done, first time it's hard, then you know this can be difficult. And my whole job is that. So handling that in personal life as well as with the dozens of clients that I'll see, that gets to be rough sometimes. So but it is part of the job, and that's why trying to refine it and getting better at it is important, I would say. So yeah, I don't know, hope this video is insightful. If you're not a therapist, getting a little bit of insight here. I could probably talk longer, more detailed topic on this. And if you are a therapist, hopefully this was helpful, maybe relatable to some extent. I'm sure there's some things I said in here where some people are like, I can't believe he does that, and other people probably are like, I do the same thing. And it's a subjective and personal thing in a lot of ways, and there's some objectivity to this conversation for sure, but yeah, everyone's different. So that's where I'm at today. If I end up changing my policies dramatically, it's probably worthwhile to follow back up on this and do another video. But until then, that is that. And yeah, happy Monday to everyone. If you want to talk therapy in any capacity, feel free to comment or reach out to me in the contact info below. If you're interested in therapy services with me or elsewhere, I'm happy to be a guiding post for that and a redirector of that. So feel free to reach out if you'd like. Have a good week, y'all. Bye.